a very good morning or good afternoon based on which coast you're on. My name is Sujai. CJ, that's easier. Currently, I'm the Senior VP and General Manager of the Enterprise Business at Juniper. Before I actually joined Juniper, I came to Juniper as a part of an acquisition of a company which I had founded called Mist Systems. And today, I would be focusing on how I came about starting Mist in a very mature market. Previous to Mist, I was at Cisco running the product management for the enterprise business there, and before that at Motorola and Nortel. What is exciting is that the Mist journey started based on, believe it or not, an aha moment with a customer discussion. While I was at Cisco, we had won a huge access refresh, which means a refresh for the Wi-Fi and the follow-on switching business. It was a multi-million-dollar deal. And when my CTO at Cisco, Bob Friday, and my co-founder and partner in crime at Mist was at a celebratory dinner, the CIO asked us, or asked Bob, how do I know that when this network goes live, the customer who comes to my location or the employees who are working at my enterprise do not get a bad experience on the wireless network? And Bob's take was, well, I don't. And the CIO said, isn't it odd? We've just invested millions of dollars with a focus on enhancing and improving the end user experience, and you just told me we cannot do that. And Bob's take was simple. He said the architectures of today are fundamentally focused on, is the access point doing okay or not, your Wi-Fi router? Is the switch doing okay or not? Is the network, the devices that make up the network doing okay or not? There is literally no focus on whether the user or the thing connected to that network is doing okay or not. And while Bob was talking about that, a thought stuck in his head, that wouldn't it be great if we fundamentally started looking at networks which focused on end user experience? So he came back from the customer meeting. Bob and I were reminiscing on this conversation he had with the customer, and we said, you know what? We should definitely try to do that. So with that vision of focusing on end user experience rather than the network, we decided to leave Cisco and start up Mist. What was exciting and interesting at the same time was we decided to enter the Wi-Fi market, a very mature market, dominated by 800-pound gorillas such as Cisco and a number two such as Hewlett-Packard, HP, Aruba as they call it now, HP Enterprise. And it was an anxious moment. But what we had was a fundamental vision of transforming end user experience, which led to Mist. So if I look at the whole thesis around Mist, it was fundamentally up, which means a network being up is not the same as, someone having a good experience on the network. The network may be working fine. You may not be able to connect onto the network. I'll take a very simple example as we all navigate this global pandemic. First of all, of course, I wish for the well-being and the safety of you and your family. But even now, when I'm connected from my home, believe it or not, I was talking to Ash, I'm actually going on two networks. I'm going on the network which is provided by my service provider on a wireline, and my audio is on a cellular network. Because I'm not sure which one of them will break at any point in time. So if I was to call the service provider or the cellular provider, I'm sure they'll say everything's working fine, Sujai. But at the end of the day, I may not have a good experience. So fundamentally, that is what we feel is the shift of transformation going from network being up to network providing a good experience. And as we went through this journey, wireless was the best place to start. I mean, I'm sure if I took a poll, most of you, if not all, are connected on some sort of a wireless network. It is the place where people connect to. It's the place which is blamed the most. So we said, you know what? let's fundamentally start with the wireless network. There was another thing which was important, and some of these learnings could actually go towards the way Bob and I thought about entering a very mature market. If you look at the Wi-Fi market, frankly, no innovation had happened for over a decade. If I start looking at the time when we co-founded MIST, which was in 2014. Wi-Fi has gone over multiple generations. Gen 1 was in the late 90s, early 2000s with the likes of Cisco, which had acquired a company called Aeronet. Then in 2003, something amazing happened. A wireless technology called Centrino was introduced by Intel in all laptops. As soon as that happened, Wi-Fi went mainstream. Close to $9 billion of value was created in a few years. Wi-Fi went mainstream. And there were multiple companies which were contending for the business. If you think about it, this is where it gets exciting, or maybe at least for MIST it was exciting. If we roll back the clock in 2014, 2015 timeframe and looked at when was the last change which had happened on the wireless network, it was by a company called Meraki. Amazing team, amazing people, but they had conceived that idea of a cloud-enabled wireless network in 2007. So you're talking about 2007 to 2014. No new innovation in that market. Over a decade, but see what changed. First, we all know the phones, whether it was an iPhone or the Android, unleashed the mobility era. Modern cloud elements started coming in, such as Amazon Web Services and over time, Google Cloud Platform. We started getting used to the Netflix, the Facebooks, the Instagrams, and many other social media platforms. But fundamentally, our connectivity architecture had not changed. So as we were trying to embrace all of these new use cases, the network, which was fundamentally supposed to support it, was still stuck in the Stone Age. The way I look at it, vintage wines are good, but vintage architectures will not work. At the same time, while the use cases were increasing, changes were happening in protocols. Bluetooth, we all are used to. Bluetooth Low Energy came out, which fundamentally helped look at multiple aspects of how you can transform digitally. Looking at all of these things is what led us to come out with MIST, which fundamentally was focused on introducing the network for the next decade. So if we look at it fundamentally, a mature market, but with a pent-up demand, a need to focus on end-user experience, which led to us entering that market. And another important point, started with an aha moment with a customer interaction. When we started embarking on the journey, it was really critical. Yes, we had a vision. Yes, we felt the market needed it. Yes, we felt the market did not have an offering for it. But whenever we go into such things, it's all a team sport. And hence, we embarked on making sure we built a very strong team of people. MIST was actually unlike a startup. It was not just about the average age of people in the startup, but fundamentally it's about the experience we had in having built wireless networks before. Since the early days when W of Wi-Fi did not even exist, Bob Friday, our co-founder, had been dabbling with wireless broadband. We grew up building these wireless networks, these wireless protocols. We grew up leading the charge on Gen 1 Wi-Fi, Gen 2 Wi-Fi, and felt we were ready to come out with the Gen 3 Wi-Fi. What was also more interesting and exciting was we knew things were resonating when top VCs and top companies in this arena started talking to us about investments. So, simple thing. A story started from a customer about end-user experience, a saturated market which had not seen innovation over a decade, and a pent-up demand. And finally, when we built the team, we were ready for it. But as we embarked on the journey, it was critical for us to make sure that we built the architecture from the ground up. Why is this important? Very simply said, think about it. As soon as we change the focus from whether it's the uptime of a switch or an access point or a router or elements in the network to the uptime or the quality of experience of a user's connectivity, the amount of information we have to deal with goes up astronomically. Simple example. Let's say I have a standard mid-sized network. It may have approximately maybe 10,000 network elements on it, 10,000 switches, access points, routers, and multiple other things connected onto the network. That 10,000 network element network may be supporting close to 20 to 100,000. In case of Arizona State University, it's huge what it is supporting. As soon as you start looking at the number of connections, the amount of information which I have to take a look at suddenly goes up 10 times, 20 times, in certain cases 100 times compared to what the architectures are enabling today. As soon as you look at the end user experience, you have to look at lots of data. As soon as you start looking at lots of data, it is impossible for a human being to sift through that large amounts of data and start making sense about what is happening to the end user experience. And hence, the only way you can start looking at it is leveraging math and physics. It comes back to the fundamental concepts of what we have learned at school before. So we started applying math and physics to this data, whether it was statistical analysis, whether it was mutual information, whether it was lift equations, whether it was reinforcement learning, did not matter. Fundamentally, data was coming in, we started applying physics and math to it. As soon as we started applying physics and math to it, data science models started emerging. Amazing start to the journey. As soon as data science models started emerging, we had customers who had different operational needs. Like when we provide this network to 4 of the Fortune 10, they are very different from when we are providing these networks to a school district or these networks to a university or a college or to a hospital. Fundamentally, what that means is each customer had their own needs, which means these data science models had to be morphed and customized to learn what is happening at an end customer site, which fundamentally led to the AI algorithms. So if you look at it, started with the journey of end user experience, meant a lot of information I have to sift through, which led to data science model, which led to our AI algorithm. A short digression. My co-founder and I were sitting at a dinner table in 2015, and we fundamentally started looking at, how do we personalize this experience, which came from a customer. This was actually a CIO who's now the CIO at Dartmouth College, Mitch Davis, very well known in his craft. And his take was, Sujai, when you start looking at this concept, you have to emotionally attach. You have to personify this AI engine. And as we were trying to personify, we actually named it Marvis. It was not done by a branding agency. It was fundamentally done by Bob and I. And what was the genesis of Marvis? Believe it or not, I love the movie Iron Man. There's a digital assistant called Jarvis. We said, drop the J, put the M from Miss, voila, you got Marvis. I'm happy to note that something which started as a quick thinking in 2015 based on some good advice from Mitch Davis turned out to be one of the strongest brands in networking and AI adopted by most of the medium and large enterprises in the world today. So coming back to the story, lots of data because of user experience led to data science model, led to AI algorithms, and led to Marvis. But as we were looking at Marvis, one of the key things which came out is we said if we are so confident about our AI engine, we should be using the AI engine Marvis to support our own customers. And that led to industries first in the networking industry, AI-driven support and operations. So when our customers call with a problem, the question first is addressed by Marvis. if Marvis is unable to answer the question, a human being gets involved and goes through the steps to understand the problem and remediate it. While the human being is going through the steps, these steps are then digitized and fed back into Marvis. So as you can see, through this feedback loop, Marvis is continuing to grow, and Marvis has been growing for over 5 years. As we model Marvis, it fundamentally means that I need to have the network which can continue to take these changes, sometimes even on a daily basis, without impacting the end user experience. And that led to the modern cloud stack, the Mist Cloud. If you look at our journey, it was not about AI as a buzzword. It was not about, hey, let's take a modern cloud stack and make it a architecture. It was fundamentally driven by a need. Any and every innovation at Mist was driven by a need. Necessity is the motherhood of invention. And fundamentally, when people sometimes ask me, why Mist as such a young company is being adopted, some of the leading players across verticals in the world, my simple take is because we fundamentally focused on solving real life problems rather than chasing buzzwords. If you look at end user benefits, we are today assuring the networks which are critical in our day-to-day lives. We may not realize it, but we are fundamentally helping enterprises automate at scale. We are also helping enterprises understand and garner insights into what is happening to the employee experience. There's a company who we have worked with who have been able to reduce their number of user-generated trouble tickets by over 90%. But as you start dealing with this astronomical scale, automation becomes critical. One of our key customers fundamentally said, machines should configure machines. Sometimes it's a scary thought, but that is the only way we can intelligently scale in today's world. And last but not the least, when we speak about end user experience, it is not just about connectivity. It's about personalizing their experience. It's about digitizing their experience through their mobile device. I will take the example of a hospital. What we have worked with them on is the ability for them to have a digital engagement with their doctors, with their clinical staff, with their patients. A simple use case which we did. They have a unit where the patients unfortunately are either undergoing dementia or other critical conditions. And they have had situations where the patient would just walk out of the room and no one in the hospital knew where the patient went. We worked with them to come out with a use case where the patient had a BLE tag on their wrist, and as soon as the patient left the bed, the Mist system detected it, sent a note to the nurse's station, and on a trial, we also put it that it automatically locked the door so it could not be opened from inside. This use case, if you think about it, is digitally connecting the user, the location, and the physical resources in the building to deliver a simple clinical use case. That is fundamentally what Mist is enabling. I will speak about how in this global pandemic, our customers have leveraged us, our community has leveraged us to deliver use cases which are fundamentally helping the community cope with what's going on today. What was interesting in around 2019, we realized that we had to now extend from a pure wireless network to switching and routing. That is where we went into a partnership with a company called Juniper. Juniper, very well known in the world. Most of the core routing, we can clearly say a lot of the internet is being powered by Juniper products today. Very technology-oriented company, and they were the ones who teamed up with us to deliver on what we call the AI-driven enterprise. And this AI-driven enterprise was fundamentally about extending Mist's vision from just wireless to across the network stack. And this is something which led to us ushering the network for the next decade. So if you look at what this AI-driven enterprise is enabling, what it is enabling is the ability for the Mist network to figure out the quantification of end-user experience across the full network stack. Let's give you an example. So an example use case is of one of the largest retailers in the world. You all have dealt with that retailer in some way, shape, or form. And this retailer has close to 3,000 branches worldwide, or stores rather. When they were piloting us early on, and this is 2017, 2018 timeframe, one day, Marvis at 11 a.m. reported that some of their stores were not doing well. First time in the networking industry, we are alerting the customer that there's something going on in some of the stores. The customer's help desk called the stores, and the store said, no, everything is fine. At 2 p.m., the stores, the same stores who had said everything is fine, started calling the help desk saying, no, we're actually seeing issues, drastic issues at the stores. And the first thing the CIO asked us is, how did you know? It was very simple. Marvis had baselined the environment over time, and that day it was clearly seeing a departure from baseline. It's not rocket science at all. It's very logical. And hence it was complaining. And what we found out was the issue was not on the wireless network, the issue was not on the wired network, the issue was on the routing network. So fundamentally the ability to look across the network and provide a holistic view driven by the end user experience is what led to the AI-driven enterprise. What is exciting for me, when Bob and I started with the vision of Mist, it was about end user experience. With Juniper, we feel we're able to bring to fruition the vision which fundamentally will change the landscape of networking, which has not undergone a tectonic shift in the architecture for over a decade. I'm not going to go too much into the details of this, but fundamentally, if you start looking at it, it is an architecture which is driven by what the customer needs to look at any point in time, and it's relevant across enterprises. I'm proud to say 4 of the Fortune 10, 25% of the Fortune 500, largest enterprises in their verticals. Size doesn't matter, smaller, medium, large size, they all are now able to take advantage of Marvis to fundamentally help seamless operations in the network. And as I say, architecture matters. If you look at what is on the left-hand side, the journey started, frankly, very logically for a lot of the way the networks were being built. It all started with the need for a wireless network. So people said, okay, you've got the wireless controllers. Then people said, well, I need to manage this wireless network. Okay, great. Let me give you management systems. Customers had these controllers, these appliances, and then they were given these management systems. Then people said, well, I want to assure the network. No problem. Let me ship you another appliance. Then people said, well, I want to know the location of the person. Well, let me ship you another appliance. So as you can see on the left-hand side, the way the architectures were built, they were brittle. For every need, a new appliance was being shipped. Compare and contrast that to the network for the next decade, where as you enable things, all you have to do is go to the dashboard and click location, click assurance. A new service is now being enabled rapidly in seconds rather than what was taking days, months, years to enable. And that is critical when we look at architecture matters. I'll take an example of what we have done with certain customers. So on the left-hand side is a tracking at one of the customers, and right-hand side is Disney, Swan, and Dolphin. So if you look at on the left-hand side, what's happening is someone requests a wheelchair, and now you can see the end-user experience. This is where the wheelchair has been located. And the customer is able to actually track what is happening to that experience on the wheelchair. I'll just hurry up the video a bit, but you can clearly see a digital engagement where you requested for the asset, and you can clearly see where the asset is at any point in time. Okay. Now, let's take a look at this other use case. This other use case is one of the largest resorts in the world. And here what you're seeing is on the left-hand side is your mobile device. And on the right-hand side is the backend, which you may not want to worry about. And in the middle is the actual user having that phone. As you can see, the users moving in the you can see the blue dot, and you can see the real-timeness of what is happening. Fundamentally, this is the relevance we are talking about in networks for today. Okay. Exciting, right? So let me just quickly do a recap on how Mist evolved to be one of the leading powerhouses in the networks. And I thought this would be possible in 2014 when I left a really cushy job at a great place to work at Cisco and started on this journey with Bob Friday. No, I did not. But what I had confidence and faith in is I'm solving a real world problem, which has applicability in where we have to go. I was excited about building the network for the next decade because very few people get that opportunity in their lifetime for something different. And as we start looking at it, here is where I get really excited. As I said, at Juniper, we fundamentally worked with the community to enable use cases to deal with the global pandemic. As soon as this hit, one of the key needs by the community was mobile test stations. Test stations were being opened up rapidly. And guess what? They needed the ability to network. They needed the ability to enable wireless networks really quickly and in minutes. The Mist platform enabled that. Literally, we call it the pop-up kits, were being sent across hospitals, across test sites to enable kits which could be started by anybody by clicking it on, switching it on, and voila, the network was getting created in minutes. That's what the architecture enabled. The next thing started with, hey, how do we start looking at contact tracing? How do we start looking at, as people look at a safe way to return back to work, as the phase 2, as we were calling it, how can we use the same network, the relevance which Mist was providing to enable that? And that is what is something which we enabled. Last but not the least, as you start looking, and this is an eye chart. Forget what's, all these bullets which are there. The key part is, as we all start working from home, how do we assure your connection? I was talking to Ash before we started this conversation today, and I was telling her, I'm at home, I have horrible WAN connectivity because the WAN is overloaded. From where I stay, a lot of people are trying to connect into my network. Even at my house, I've got 3 kids, and they all are on their collaboration tools. They all are trying to do their summer things. Everybody is congesting the network. How did I find out that was happening? Marvis helped me, clearly saying, hey, this is the issue with the WAN, and I had to share that information with our service provider. But on this call right now, not only am I connected on my internet, I'm also connected on audio over a cellular network. And I'm assuring both of these connections with Marvis. At least I have the luxury for both the connections. Many people don't. But think about this. A customer reached out to me. They have approximately 8,000 employees. And they are spread across, when they're going to work, they're spread across 6 to 10 locations. When this global pandemic hit and people started working from home, he said, Sujai, I suddenly feel that from 6 to 10 locations, we have morphed into 8,000 micro locations. And the only way I'm able to assure their connection today, or at least know what is going on. Why is my Zoom session not working? Why is my team sessions not working? It's because of fundamentally Marvis Mist helping me guide through this whole thing. And that is why I feel so excited about what we've been able to achieve at Mist Juniper. Because we are solving real world problems. We are bringing a new network to a place which definitely needs it today. So if I start looking at what is happening in the world today, the AI-driven enterprise is here. 7 of the largest retailers in the world have adopted this architecture. Key universities in the world, key colleges in the world have adopted this architectures. Key retailers have adopted this architectures. And fundamentally, it is driven by a maniacal focus on solving what is happening in the networks today. So if I was to look at what are my learning experiences, if I was to really sum it up, it boils down to, number one, listening to the customer to really understanding what is the need which is happening in the market. Number two, looking at how technology can solve that problem. Let's not build technology for technology's sake. Let's look at how it solves the problem. And last but not the least, it eventually becomes a team sport. It is about the team issues. That is what allowed us to go up against pace hunger. That is what allowed us to go into a very saturated market to take and create one of the fastest growing networking franchises in the world today. So with that, I wanted to make sure I had some time for some questions. I would like to, Ash, open it up to any questions people may have, either on chat or on audio.
So Sujai, I saw, this is Mike, in the chat, Lev Gonik has a question, and he basically said, and again, your last 2 slides really kind of talk to the experience at home and what it would take to extend the university campus to home. But in general, he's asking, can you talk about persistence for on-net experience across the campus, wherever that might be? I continue to be perplexed why we haven't made our ubiquitous wireless network able to easily and consistently support persistence. Mesh networks in our home environment seem to be doing better than our enterprise systems. Can you talk to that?
Absolutely. So a very simple thing which I would say is, I heard from a customer when I was starting this. He said, Sujai, the thing which perplexes me is my kid can solve this problem at my house and I can't get to solve it at my campus. What gives? The simple answer, the way I would look at it is, the networks before were fundamentally designed to make sure that the network itself is working. There was no way of quantifying the end user experience, because fundamentally the way the networks were architected, it was impossible to be looking at this information coming from the user and make sense of it. One of the key aspects of the Mist network was about client and application visibility. You're right. As you're walking in your campus, as you're going to the library, or let's say you're going to another class, why does your session fail? Your session fails even though people talk about layer 3 roaming, they talk about IPv6, they talk about all the fancy technology which is there. Your session fails because the network actually does not know your session has failed. And when there are close to 70, 80,000 unique connections being created every day, it is impossible for a human being to look and say, this connection failed and it failed for this reason. So fundamentally, it starts with client level application visibility. So a short digression. When Mist is looking at quantifying end user experience, we can actually look at when network makes a change, did it make a good change or did it make a bad change? There's something called a concept of reinforcement learning, which I'm sure many of you know on this call. What we are able to do is, as the user is going through his or her journey in the campus, we are every second looking at what's happening to the user's client device. When a network makes a change, we look at, did the user experience get bad or get better? If it gets bad, we slap the wrist of Marvis and say, thou shalt not do this again. You have to correct your algorithm. If the user experience gets better, we give Marvis brownie points. We give more to that algorithm and say, do that more. And as you start looking at this, the user experience starts getting better. Fundamentally, because the issue today is if you can't quantify user experience, how do you know it gets better or worse when you're making a network change? And fundamentally, that is the biggest change that we are bringing to the network. What I would say is, as universities have started deploying, we just deployed it at a pretty spread out campus. It's a very well-known campus in the United States. And the key focus is as they bring students back to school, we all want, we know that world will go. They want to make sure the network is up, the network is persistent, and the network is delivering on the promise which it has been saying it should deliver for the last so many years. And the fundamental change is ability to quantify end user experience, and only then do you know whether it's good or bad and do something about it. Thank you.
There's another question from Lev as well. Sujai, what is your view of how the market is going to shake out between Wi-Fi 6 and 5G? What are the implications for our campus enterprise designs going forward? And there's a lot of promises being made out there.
Lev, I mean, you obviously seem to be, knowing the space really well. It's not just about Wi-Fi 6. It's not about 5G macro. You probably started hearing about CBRS, right? You started hearing about 3.5 gigabit LTE. You started hearing about Wi-Fi 6 enhanced. It's like, guys, how do I start looking at this architecture with all of these hitting at the same time? Fundamentally, again, it transformed to use cases. The approach which we are taking, whether it's Wi-Fi 6, whether it's 5G, whether it's private or public, macro or micro, they are at a layer 1 level. We have to start looking at ingestion of information from these various networks and fundamentally create a handle of the end user experience, regardless of which protocol that network connection is coming from. So if you look at it, Wi-Fi and cellular, Hotspot 2.0 came out, .11u as they call it in the Wi-Fi space, which was actually led by my co-founder Bob Friday from a standards perspective. That Hotspot 2.0 is trying to do seamless handoff of authentication between a 5G and a Wi-Fi 6 network. So fundamentally what we feel is these networks have to work together, and they need to be roaming agreements which have to be built onto the network. So when you are making a decision on the enterprise architecture, you're making a decision on how you're seamlessly enabling the user experience rather than which technology would you embark on, because these technologies will change every 3 to 4 years. Yeah.
I don't see
Thank
any
you.
other. Sujai, one other comment back on the previous question. When we talk about, especially when you try to extend to small campus or home, is probably the biggest thing I've encountered is that noticing that when people build architectures around these big controller architectures, they're very inflexible. And so that's why it's very difficult to give the experience that you get from a cloud-based architecture. And probably the number one thing people need to look at, and as we've seen with several of the large universities that have recently gone to us, is the fact that we can easily zero-touch provision in the cloud. I'm assuming you agree with that. That's, again, how we enable things even from the home is we don't care whether it's 10,000 locations or 1 or 2, we efficiently do it in the cloud, correct?
Absolutely, and fundamentally the thing is, as he said, is the machines which we program are really doing it, and the machine doesn't care whether it's doing for 1 or it's doing for 10,000, or in certain customer situations, that customer sees close to, I kid you not, 3 million roams in just 4 of their locations. 3 million. And you can imagine it's robotics and you can know what's going on. Fundamentally, I think as Lev wrote, this is about the future of SDN and next generation wireless networks. And it's interesting if the controller was brought up. We say at Mist, Christmas comes every Thursday. If you think about the networks today, every Thursday, the cloud, the Mist cloud gets new upgrades, which are rolled over universally. Compare that to in a controller architecture, people taking 12 to 18 to 24 months to even touch the network. That is brittle when you have to bring new services. Like the COVID-19, when we were helping the community, that service was conceived and released in less than 3 months. And our existing customers are able to enable it in seconds. They just have to go to the Mist dashboard, click proximity tracing, voila, it's there, because that microservice is running in the backend. The second part of it compared to controller architecture is fundamentally the agility of bringing these new services, and that is being driven by the microservices architecture. Simply spoken, when the crack vulnerability, it's been a while, when it came out, which was impacting authentication on wireless networks, many people took not days, they took months, in certain cases a year to upgrade the network. The Mist universe, because of the way it was architected from a modern cloud element, was upgraded for customers globally in less than 4 to 6 hours with minimal impact to the network. This is fundamentally being enabled by, number one, everything being controlled by machines, everything being programmed intelligently by the human being into Marvis, which is then controlling the machine. And last but not the least, always measuring. Anytime we do anything, did it impact the end user? Did it better the end user? And then making sure the algorithms grow towards that reinforcement. So I know we have very less time left. Any last question?
I think we're clean on the chat, Sujai.
Okay, so I would like to end by saying, first of all, really thank you for the opportunity. Thank you to the team which has created this forum. I, for one, definitely get really excited, and I do feel the Learning Man forum is a good way, at least for folks like me, to share what we have done, and frankly, based on the inspiration and the questions and the feedback and guidance we get on such forums. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my experience, and thank you so much for what the Learning Man is doing.